lipids is referring to greasy, oily stuff, butter, ghee, cottage cheese. So anything that has fat in it, that's a lipid. Lipids, fat. So fatty acid, it's going to consist of a long chain of carbon atoms with a carboxyl group at one end. So that would be the definition. So fish oil, these are some fish oil capsules there. And then there are trans fats, and then these are different structures. Now I'm going to ask you different structures, cis or trans. So this is the structure of fat. In other words, it's called triglyceride. It's going to have a glycerol, and then it's going to have 3 fatty acids attached to it. So tri means 3. So triglyceride is the first type of lipid we are covering. I'm going to give you another one too. So triglyceride are the most abundant source of energy, gives you a lot of energy. And the fancy word for lipids in anatomy is adipose tissue. It's going to insulate the body. It's going to provide cushioning as well. It's going to provide protection. So it's found around your kidneys, providing protection in your buttocks, providing cushioning. And it has lots of energy also around your intestines. So when you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to break down this adipose tissue and get energy from it, and that's when it gets a little bit difficult. Again, this is the structure: triglyceride, glycerol, and then 3 fatty acid tails. This is the fatty acid. And there are 2 types. There is saturated fat and there's unsaturated fat. I want to know if any of you guys know what word saturated means. If you do, let me know in the chat. What does saturated mean? Anyone? George? Chris? Contains lots of hydrogen bonds, ions. Savannah said. Just the word saturated. Delicious. Saturated means full. It means full. If you say this towel is saturated with water, it's full of water. It's wet towel. So saturated means full. And I asked you guys, because I'm going to show you the structure and why they are called saturated and unsaturated fat. If you look at this structure is full with hydrogen bonds. There's no space. So this is saturated. It's full. This is unsaturated. There's no hydrogen bond here, creates a double bond. When that happens, it's going to give it a crooked tail. So this is a crooked tail here. That's unsaturated. So when we go back to the definitions, so fatty acid with no double bonds in its carbon tail, saturated. There's no double bonds because it's full with hydrogen. There's no extra bond that can make a double bond there. So that's saturated. If you go back to unsaturated fat definition, this lipid with 1 or more double bonds in fatty acid. When there's a double bond, creates a space and a crooked tail. Now you might have also heard saturated fats are solid at room temperature, like this butter, and then unsaturated fats are liquid. And the reason for that is because this is straight. It's full with hydrogens, it's straight. So it's gonna be packed more tightly, so it's more dense. Whereas this has space in it, it's not packed as tightly, so it's liquid on room temperature. So that's the reason them being solid or liquid is because of the structures they have. So there's space in there, that's why they're liquid. So saturated fats pack more tightly than unsaturated fat and tend to be more solid.
Just like if you take a solid, that's a butter, which is saturated. If you put it on the heat, it will heat it up and it will become unsaturated.
Yeah, it starts to break it down. Another thing I want you to learn from this class is to make healthy life choices. So another thing that comes with the fats is cholesterol. And cholesterol, if you have too much of it, can start blocking the arteries, and then it can cause, some health issues. So maybe when you're picking which one to eat, try to go with less cholesterol in it. So that was the first kind. We said triglyceride, first kind of lipid. Second kind I want you guys to know is phospholipid. Phospholipid have phosphate group in it. Phosphate group is another molecule found on the periodic table, phosphate. It's going to have two fatty acid chains. So it's going to have two fatty acid chains. It's going to have a phosphate group that's called phospholipid. Some properties of phospholipid, it's going to have hydrophilic head. We learned this word, now we're applying it. Hydrophilic means they like water. So the head likes water here. And then the hydrophobic tails. The tails, they like to stay away from water. They don't like water. So hydrophilic head, hydrophobic tails. This is the structure of a cell. This is really important because this is basically where life started. This is structural foundation of all cell membranes, and this is a phospholipid. If you take a phospholipid, you put it in water, maybe a beaker, you shake it up, this is how it's going to arrange itself. The heads, they're going to face towards the water, and these heads face towards the water. Tails don't like water, so they're going to face away from water. So when it gets shaken up, that's how it's going to arrange itself, and it's going to make a bilayer. So that's a bilayer, phospholipid bilayer. And this is what's making the structural foundation of the cells. So heads, there's water inside the cell. They're facing the water, or they're towards the water. And then there's water outside the cell as well. So the heads are towards the water here. The tails, they're not facing the water. They're not towards the water. They're away from the water because they don't like water. Anything that has to pass through. So this creates a different environment inside the cell versus outside. If the contents has to get inside the cell, it has to pass through this phospholipid bilayer. If it's maybe small ions, it can pass directly through. If it's a bigger, maybe sugar molecule, it might need a channel to go through. So we're going to talk about this a lot more in chapter, I think 3 or 4. We're going to go over the cell in that chapter. So this creates a lipid bilayer. This is double layer of lipid arranged tail to tail. So tail to tail. So that's second type of lipid I want you guys to know. Phospholipid. Third kind I want you to know is the steroid. Steroid. It's a type of lipid with 4 carbon rings and no fatty acid. One kind is cholesterol. So this is the starting point for some of these hormones that you might have heard about: testosterone, estrogen, cortisol. So you need cholesterol for that. Like I said, too much cholesterol is bad, but if you had 0 cholesterol, that's not good either. So you need some cholesterol, but when it gets more than the normal level, then it starts causing issues. Another steroid is the vitamin D. You can get it from sunlight, also get it from milk. Now imagine if they started putting steroid on the milk gallons instead of vitamin D. I think people would freak out. So that's another starting ingredient for some of these hormones. And then if you switch the hormones at this certain stage of development, it can cause maybe males to look like females or females to look like males. So if there's not enough of these hormones when it's needed, it can cause some development issues as well. So that's third kind. So to review, we said first one was the triglyceride, second one phospholipid, and third steroid. So those are the 3 types we covered for the lipids.